Marina opened the refrigerator door for the third time in 10 minutes and closed it again, having taken nothing. The apartment was so quiet she could hear the refrigerator's hum, the kitchen clock ticking, and her own breathing. For 22 years, she'd woken to someone calling, "Mom!" For 22 years, her day had begun with other people's needs. But today, on her 50th birthday, she'd woken at 8 in the morning by herself, and didn't know what to do with that. Her son had gotten married a month ago and moved out. Her daughter had left for college 2 years earlier, but back then there were still holidays, surprise visits, bags of dirty laundry, and texts saying, "Mom, can you Venmo me?" Now her daughter called on Sundays for exactly 20 minutes, told her things in a bright voice, and ended with, "Okay, Mom, I gotta go." Marina walked to the window. In the glass, a woman in a bathrobe stared back, not old, but somehow used up. Like an appliance that had served faithfully, and suddenly found itself unnecessary. She ran her hand over her face. When had these lines appeared around her mouth? And suddenly saw below, on the windowsill outside, a gray cat. The cat looked at her with yellow eyes and was clearly waiting to be let in. "I'm losing my mind," Marina thought, but opened the window anyway. The cat jumped into the room soundlessly, like falling snow. It circled the kitchen, sniffing at corners, rubbed against a chair leg, and settled on the windowsill, tail curled around itself. "Whose are you?" Marina asked, then immediately felt foolish. Who was she talking to? The cat tilted its head, and there was something so humanly curious in the gesture that Marina found herself continuing. "Want some milk?" She took a carton from the fridge, poured it into a saucer. The cat jumped down, approached, sniffed, and walked away. Sat across from Marina and looked again, a long, appraising stare. "What?" Marina crossed her arms. "Don't like milk? Or are you not that kind of cat?" The apartment was still quiet. Too quiet. On a morning like this years ago, Marina would have already made breakfast for 3, yelled at her son about scattered socks, reminded her daughter about her paper. She would have been living. Now she stood in her kitchen in a bathrobe talking to a strange cat, because there was no one else. "You know," she said, surprising herself, "I haven't slept until 8 in the morning in 22 years. Not once. Not even when I was sick. And today I woke up, and the apartment's empty. Do you understand? Empty." The cat blinked slowly, the way those who know how to listen blink. Marina sat down on a chair. For some reason, she wanted to talk. "I thought when they grew up, I'd finally take care of myself. Everyone says that, the kids move out and you get your life back. You remember who you are besides Mom." She gave a crooked smile. "Only here's the problem, I don't remember. I don't remember who I am." She stood, walked around the kitchen. Opened a cabinet, looked at the neat rows of plates. Once she dreamed of beautiful dishes. Now here they were, Japanese porcelain, bought for their anniversary. Sitting and gathering dust, because you don't set a table for 12 when there are only 2 of you. "My husband basically moved out too. Well, not really, he's just at work from dawn till dark. And when he's home, he watches TV. We talk about bills and about the neighbor's pipe bursting again. That's our whole marriage." The cat moved to the table and lay down, resting its chin on its paws. Its eyes never left Marina. "The strangest thing, you know what? I thought it would be easier. Thought, finally, freedom. I'd sleep in, read books, maybe try yoga. But instead I walk around the apartment not knowing what to do with myself." She ran her hand across the countertop, perfectly clean, white to a shine. "Yesterday I spent an hour looking for something to do. An hour, understand? I cleaned the apartment, but it was already clean. Made dinner. My husband came home at 10 and said he'd eaten at work. I went to bed at 9 in the evening. 9! Because there was nothing else to do. Her voice trembled. And you know what's most terrible? I called my daughter yesterday. Not on Sunday, on a Wednesday. Just because. She answered on the fifth ring and said, "Mom, I'm in class, I'll call you back." She didn't call back. Marina swallowed. And I'm not offended. Really. She has her own life. That's what I wanted, for them to have their own lives. I just somehow didn't think that mine would end when theirs began. The cat stood, stretched, and gently touched Marina's hand with its paw. She flinched in surprise. You think I'm wrong? Think I should just pull myself together? Marina tried to smile, but it came out crooked. Everyone says that. My friends find a hobby. My husband, don't invent problems. Even the therapist on Instagram writes, midlife crisis, focus on yourself. But how do you focus on yourself when that self hasn't existed for 22 years? She sat back down, dropped her head into her hands. I remember the day I found out I was pregnant with Dasha. I was 28. I stood in the bathroom with the test thinking, okay, now my life will change. And it did change. I stopped being Marina. Became Dasha's mom. Then Dasha and Kirill's mom. Then Oleg's wife and Dasha and Kirill's mom. And then... She raised her head. Then everyone took their roles and left, and I was alone. The cat jumped from the table, circled the chair, and sat at Marina's feet. Rested its chin on her knee. And in that touch was so much warmth that Marina felt something inside beginning to thaw. You know what I'm most afraid of? She whispered. That I'll just keep waiting. Waiting for my daughter to visit. For my son to stop by. For my husband to remember he has a wife. I'll become one of those women who live through other people's lives because they don't have their own. She stroked the cat's head. It closed its eyes. So tell me. Marina spoke quieter now, almost to herself. How do you start living again when you've forgotten who you are? When all these years you gave yourself away piece by piece, here you sacrificed your career, there you lost sleep, there you put off a dream for later, and now supposedly you can get it all back, but there's nothing to return to. Emptiness. The cat opened its eyes. Looked at Marina, and in that gaze was no pity. Something else. A question, perhaps. What? Asked Marina. You think I'm asking the wrong question? The cat stood, walked around the kitchen. Stopped by the refrigerator. There, on the door, hung magnets from different cities. Italy, Prague, Barcelona. All brought by the kids. Marina had looked at these magnets for years without seeing them. But now she suddenly noticed, not one had she brought herself. Is that what you mean? Her voice grew quieter. That I never even took a vacation alone? Always with the family. Oleg chose the hotel, the kids chose the activities. And I just agreed. The cat returned, sat across from her. God. Marina covered her face with her hands. I don't even know what I like. I mean, I know I love my kids. No, I can't stand strawberries. But what do I enjoy? What do I want to do? What do I dream about? She fell silent. In the apartment, the clock's ticking became audible again. I used to dream. I remember, at 20 I wanted to be a psychologist. Even enrolled. But then Dasha was born, and there was no time for school. Then Kirill. Then somehow it turned out I stayed on maternity leave forever. Oleg worked, brought home money, and I became a housewife. Though I never wanted to be. She stood, walked to the window. In the courtyard, some girl was walking a dog. Young, maybe 25. Wearing earbuds, smiling at something. Free. Sometimes I look at young women and I'm jealous. Not of their youth. I'm jealous that they still have time. That they can choose. But I'm 50. Half my life is gone, And I spend it raising two people who don't need me anymore. She turned to the cat. That's terribly selfish, isn't it? To resent your children for growing up. The cat blinked slowly. In that blink was no judgment. Only attention. I'm not resentful. Marina corrected herself. I'm just lost. Understand? All these years I knew what to do. Every day was scheduled: breakfast, school, activities, homework, dinner, bed. I was needed. And now. She gestured at the empty apartment. Now I'm free. And I don't know what to do with this freedom. She sat back at the table. The cat jumped onto her lap, curled into a ball. Heavy, warm. Marina began stroking it, and from the monotonous movement her thoughts became slower, clearer. You know what I think sometimes? She said quietly. That maybe this is the price. The price of motherhood. You give your children your best years, your strength, your dreams, and that's right, I don't regret it. But nobody tells you what comes after. When they leave. She fell silent, listening to the cat's purring. Oleg doesn't understand. For him nothing changed. He worked, and still works. Sees friends, plays tennis on Saturdays. The kids were an addition to his life. Important, but an addition. For me they were life. All of life. The cat rolled onto its back, exposing its belly. Marina scratched it, and suddenly caught herself thinking, when was the last time she touched someone just because? Not from function, pat on the head, help zip a jacket, but like this, for herself? I miss touch, she admitted. My husband doesn't hug. I mean, sometimes he hugs, before bed, but it's such a formality. The kids used to hug when they were little. Would climb into my bed in the mornings, climb onto my lap. Then they grew up, and now at meetings it's a quick kiss on the cheek, and that's it. I feel untouchable. The cat suddenly flipped over and pressed its face into Marina's palm. Insistently, demandingly. What, not enough petting? Marina smiled. Okay. And continued stroking. And talking. This morning, when I woke up, I lay there thinking, what if I could go back? To that moment when I held the test. And choose differently. Not have kids. Finish school, have a career. Or maybe have them but stay myself. Not dissolve. She paused, then shook her head. But you can't go back. And you know what? Even if I could, I wouldn't choose differently. I love them. Dasha and Kirill. Love them so much I was ready to sacrifice everything. And I did. Her voice cracked. I just somehow thought love works both ways. That if I gave them all of myself they'd, I don't know, stay a little bit. Forever. But they left. And they were right to. That's how it should be. But it doesn't make it easier for me. The cat suddenly raised its head and looked Marina straight in the eyes. And in that gaze was such an obvious question that Marina almost heard it aloud. So what now? I don't know, she admitted. Honestly don't know. Everyone says find a job. But I'm 50 with a 20-year gap in my resume. Who needs me? They say find a hobby. But I tried. Signed up for painting classes, quit after a month. Yoga boring. I don't lack activities. I lack meaning. She leaned back in the chair, still stroking the cat. My whole adult life had meaning: raise the kids. Give them education, help them get on their feet. I did it well. They grew up to be good people, kind, smart, independent. I succeeded. Marina smiled wryly. And now I'm like an astronaut who completed the mission and returned to Earth. Everyone congratulates, but he doesn't know what to live for now. The cat jumped from her lap, walked to the window. Sat on the sill and looked out at the street. Marina stood, approached it. Stood beside it, looking at the courtyard. Maybe I'm overthinking it. she said more quietly. Maybe it's just hormones. Menopause and all that. It'll pass. The cat turned its head, and in its gaze was so much doubt that Marina laughed, for the first time in this conversation. Yeah, you're right. It won't pass on its own. She sat on the windowsill next to the cat. You know what I'm really afraid of? Not emptiness. Not old age. Not loneliness. I'm afraid I'll never figure out who I am. That I'll live the rest of my life in this apartment, waiting for rare calls and visits, watching Netflix and counting days. And at the end, before I die, I'll understand I never got to be myself. She placed her palm on the glass, cold, fogged. And there's one more thing I'm afraid to admit to myself. Her voice became very quiet. That sometimes, just sometimes, I regret it. Not the kids, the choice I made. That I could have lived differently. Not better, not worse, just differently. And I'll never know now what that other life would have been like. The cat rubbed against her shoulder. And Marina suddenly felt something inside beginning to clear. But regret is pointless, right? She said, as if arguing with herself. You can't change the past. All that's left is... She paused, searching for words. Is to decide what to do with what you have. The cat purred in response, low affirmative. Maybe, Marina spoke slowly, feeling for the thought. Maybe it's not about remembering who I was, but understanding who I am now. Not a mom, not a wife, just me. Marina. 50 years old. With experience, mistakes, exhaustion. But alive. She ran her hand through the cat's fur, soft, warm. I guess I need to start small. Not immediately search for the meaning of life. But just try something. Maybe go back to school for psychology. Maybe find work. Maybe just travel somewhere alone. Without Oleg, without the kids. See what that's like. The cat stood stretched. Jumped from the windowsill and headed for the exit. You're leaving? Asked Marina, surprised by the note of disappointment in her voice. The cat turned. Looked, long, attentively. And in that gaze Marina suddenly read not an answer, but permission. Permission to be angry. To regret. To start over. To make mistakes. Permission to be imperfect, lost, tired, and still continue. Thank you, said Marina, for listening. The cat blinked slowly, like a goodbye, and jumped onto the windowsill. Marina opened the window. Cold air rushed into the apartment, bringing the smell of autumn. The cat turned once more. And Marina could have sworn she saw something like a smile in its eyes. Then the cat disappeared, dissolved into the gray morning as soundlessly as it had come. Marina closed the window. Stood looking at the courtyard. Then returned to the kitchen, poured herself coffee, real coffee from a Turkish pot, not instant like usual. Sat at the table. The apartment was still quiet. But the silence had become different. Not oppressive, but expectant somehow. Marina took out her phone. Scrolled through contacts. Stopped at her friend's name, someone she hadn't called in 6 months. Pressed. Call. Len, hi. It's me. Listen, let's meet up? I want to talk. No, everything's fine. Just want to talk. She smiled, listening to the answer, and suddenly caught herself thinking, this was her first decision in many years. Not for the kids, not for her husband. For herself. Small. But hers. Outside the window, rain was beginning, and Marina watched the drops run down the glass, leaving trails. As if something important was being washed away, and space was appearing for something new. She finished her coffee. Looked at the clock, 10 in the morning. The whole day lay ahead. Empty. Free. And for the first time in many years, Marina thought, maybe this isn't the end. Maybe this is the beginning,